The Vorkash did not roar. It didn't need to. It just was a looming, coiled mass of muscle and armored flesh behind the humming containment field at the center of Lecture Bay 12. Even at rest, the creature radiated menace. Not a performance, not bravado, just its natural state. 8 feet long from snout to tail, plated in overlapping ridges of obsidian black keratin, with eyes that didn't blink so much as calculate. Its claws were thick as pry bars, curved for disembowelment. Acid glands flexed at the corners of its split lower jaw, barely restrained behind translucent fangs. And that was it, being calm. "Well," said Instructor Yar, folding 2 of his hands while his upper pair gestured broadly at the beast. "This, cadets, is what the planetary surveyors refer to as a Class 5 apex. Its designation is Vorkash, native to Threnox, a Tier 10 death world. This one, thankfully, is tranquilized and safely secured." That last part was for the students' benefit, not that anyone looked convinced. The classroom, an amphitheater of tiered alloy benches and data screens, buzzed with nervous energy. Dozens of cadets, each species more colorful and jittery than the last, stared with thinly veiled horror. The reptilian Dralti clicked low in their throats. The Vryn shimmered subtly, their skin tones fluctuating with discomfort. Even the towering Braskin twins in the front row, each with 6 lungs and the density of a dropped boulder, were leaning back. And then there was Danny. Well, Daniel, technically, but no one had called him that since the shuttle accident. Danny had stuck, somewhere between the cracked ribs, busted ankle, and the way his words came out slurred from the pain meds. He hadn't argued. Too tired. He sat in the rear, one leg propped awkwardly on the edge of the bench, ribs taped under his Academy-issue uniform, a compression brace snug around his torso. Moving hurt, breathing hurt. Thinking was an effort on some days. Today was one of the good ones. He'd made it to class. That counted. Danny tilted his head slightly to watch the Vorkash, and the Vorkash did the same. A coincidence. Had to be. This species, Yar continued, his holographic pointer cycling through gory anatomical diagrams, hunts alone, dissolves prey with enzymatic saliva, and possesses a musculature that allows it to tear through composite metals. Attempts to domesticate or even restrain the species in controlled environments have failed. Completely. There was a faint hum from the containment cage as its internal field modulated again. Several cadets flinched. "In short," Yar said, "this creature kills not for hunger, not even for dominance. It kills because everything it sees might be a threat. Or dinner." "Then why bring it here?" asked a tentacled student from the far left, one eye rotating warily. "Because science, Cadet Venno," Yar said dryly, "and because you are the next generation of xenobiologists, you must learn to observe without fear." A burst of static crackled overhead. The lights flickered. "Except," Yar muttered, peering at the ceiling, "when the ship's environmental controls choose inopportune moments to malfunction." It passed. The tension didn't. Danny shifted again, wincing. The brace dug in when he leaned forward, but the pain dulled when he sat still. He'd overdone it in physio again. He could still hear the medic chewing him out from this morning. "You keep trying to run on a fractured ankle, and those ribs'll never heal right," the man had barked. "You want to show off to the Braskins? Do it in 6 weeks when your sternum's not trying to split in half." But he hated sitting still. It made him feel worse than the pain did. The bandages under his uniform itched. The gel used in them was minty and bitter, made from some Threnoxian root extract. Uncommon stuff. Good for internal inflammation. The medbay had only had a few packs left. Danny hadn't cared what they used as long as it stopped the stabbing in his side. Now he watched the Vorkash. Its head tracked him slowly, like it recognized something. Not someone. Something. A bead of sweat rolled down Danny's temple. The classroom doors slammed shut, automatically locking as the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back all at once. Red emergency LEDs glowed. The hum of the containment field dropped an octave. A high-pitched whine began to build. "Stay calm," Instructor Yar barked, voice echoing across the bay. "This is likely a minor crack." The containment field dropped. Silence. Then, the Vorkash moved. Not with the heavy, plodding gait of a sedated animal, not like a confused lab specimen. It pounced. The cage's front panel exploded outward, shredded metal, glinting like confetti. The platform beneath it cracked with the force of the impact. Screams erupted from every corner of the room. Desks overturned. Cadets trampled one another. Yar shouted commands in 3 languages. Avrin shrieked something about divine retribution. Someone was sobbing in the corner. The Braskin twins charged the door, only to find it locked by the power failure. And Danny? Danny couldn't move. He'd tried, he really had. But by the time he'd gritted his teeth and forced his boot to the floor, the sharp lance of pain through his ribs had robbed him of air. His brace had locked up, he'd collapsed backward onto the bench, wheezing. And the Vorkash had turned toward him. For a heartbeat, time froze. The creature stepped over twisted desks. It shoved aside a fallen monitor with one massive forelimb. Its pupils dilated, its nostrils flared. Its claws tapped against the floor. Danny didn't breathe. Couldn't. He'd never been religious, but something old and primal stirred in the back of his skull. Not just fear. Not just death. Extinction. It stopped 1 pace away. The Vorkash leaned in and sniffed. Its nostrils twitched. Danny closed his eyes, his fingers curled reflexively against the bench. He waited for claws, for acid, for the end. Instead, whomp. The Vorkash folded its limbs and laid its bulk down, spine curling so its armored back pressed lightly against Danny's leg. It let out a low, vibrating hum that rippled through the bench like a warm engine idling. Danny opened one eye, then both. It wasn't attacking. It was cuddling? Nope, he whispered hoarsely. Nope, I'm concussed. I have to be concussed. The Vorkash nudged its snout against his ribs. Carefully, then purred louder. The classroom was silent. Not just quiet. Silent. Instructor Yar peeked over an overturned desk, his facial stripes faded in confusion. A Braskin twin slowly uncurled from behind a support pillar. Even the ceiling cameras whirred softly, adjusting their lenses like they weren't sure what they were looking at. The most dangerous predator known to the Galactic Concord had broken loose, and was currently curled around a human cadet like a very large, very murdery house cat. Should we tranquilize it? Vino asked quietly. No, Yar whispered back, eyes wide. That might agitate it. What if it's already eaten the human and is just digesting? Look at him. He's breathing. He might be bait. Why is it purring? Danny didn't move. Not just because he couldn't, though that was part of it, but because the Vorkash had draped a claw across his shin, like a leash, or a claim. And when Instructor Yar took one cautious step forward, the beast growled. Not loud, but deep, personal. Danny groaned. Oh, come on. I'm not even allowed to keep food in my room. How am I going to explain this? Yar swallowed. Everyone out of the room, slowly, single file. And him? Vino squeaked. He stays, obviously. Danny spent the next 6 hours in the med bay, flanked on one side by 2 security drones and on the other by a 6-limbed death machine that wouldn't stop humming. Not that he could move. The moment anyone had tried to separate them, even to offer him water, the Vorkash had flattened its ears and growled low enough to vibrate the walls. The drones had activated countermeasures. The Vorkash had cracked one's housing with a single swipe. Nobody tried again after that. Danny lay stiffly on the diagnostic bed, torso wrapped in fresh bandages, a numbing patch pulsing against his ribs. His left ankle, now confirmed as fractured in 2 places, had been placed in a med stabilizer. The pain was down to a simmer, but so was his patience. So, just to clarify, he said, voice raspy from disuse, you're telling me this thing has decided I'm its mom? Lieutenant Halvors, the lead xenobiology officer, didn't even blink. Not quite maternal, more like imprinted sibling, or possibly littermate. The Thranoxy equivalent is fluid. Right, because I smell like root paste and bad decisions. The Vorkash, whom someone had thoughtfully labeled Subject Delta 7 on his case file, shifted slightly and nestled its massive snout against Danny's arm. He hissed in pain. Gentle, buddy. There's a titanium plate under there now. Delta 7 warbled softly and licked the air beside him, stopping just shy of contact. It's mimicking grooming behavior, Halvors said, voice unreadable. You're part of its cohort now. Neat. When does it start paying rent? By day 2, word had spread. Not just through the Academy ship Vallis Concordia, but through the entire Tau Cygni sector. The phrase, Vorkash imprinting event, was now trending on 6 communication networks. Danny's medical chart had been flagged for diplomatic priority, and some unfortunate tech from admin had accidentally labeled him as Threenox compatible on the internal registry. He got 6 offers to transfer to the planetary team. He declined all of them, mostly because he couldn't stand for more than 5 minutes without the room tilting sideways. The worst part? His ribs were getting worse before they got better. Standard for multi-fractures, the medic said. The internal bruising needed another 10 days to settle. The stabilizer had fused the ankle, but weight-bearing activity was still off limits. The pain meds helped but made him loopy. The loopiness made him clumsy. The clumsiness earned him another scolding every time he tried to do anything without help. And through it all, Delta 7 remained glued to his side. When Danny was wheeled into radiology, Delta 7 padded after him. When Danny vomited after a particularly rough physio session, Delta 7 made a soft keening noise and nuzzled his back. When Danny tried to eat, Delta 7 sniffed every tray first, then ate half of the meat cubes directly off the plate. "He's gonna get food poisoning," Danny muttered. "Actually, he's detoxifying it for you," one of the nurses said helpfully. "That's adorable." "You're all insane." Delta 7 purred louder. By the end of the week, the Academy issued an official update to the Xenobiology Handling Manual. Section 9.1.7. In the event of Thrinoxian root gel contact with a Class 5 apex predatory life form, cadets are advised to avoid injured humans until imprinting risk has passed. Section 9.1.8. In the event of imprinting, the Academy accepts no liability for claw-related property damage, emotional trauma, or unsolicited grooming. They posted a holographic version of the new page next to the medbay door. Danny rolled his eyes so hard he nearly passed out. "You are aware," said Yar, standing at the foot of his bed with a tablet in 2 hands and a thermal tea mug in the other 2, "that no Vorkash has ever been pacified by non-lethal means, let alone by accident." Danny squinted at him. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "Not really." Delta 7 opened one eye. Yar shifted backward slightly. "But," Yar continued, tapping the screen, "we believe we've narrowed it down to 2 contributing factors. The root extract in your bandages mimics a native Thrinoxy scent compound. And your injuries, particularly the ribs and limp, would register you as non-threatening, possibly even vulnerable, to a species that bonds protectively with its own wounded young well." "Great," Danny said flatly. "So, I smell like a baby, and I'm pathetic. Stellar combination." "It's possible your calm response during the breach sealed the bond," Yar added thoughtfully. "Most would have panicked." "I was panicking, I just couldn't run." "Ah, yes, fascinating." Danny groaned. Delta 7 reached up and gently head-butted his bicep. Yar retreated another step. Back in the dorms, no one knew how to talk to him. The Braskin twins who used to arm wrestle Danny after drills now avoided eye contact. The Vryn cadet, Vino, had tried to drop off fruit once, but had bolted when Delta 7 bared its teeth at the open door. Even his old roommate had transferred 2 decks up. "You're like a walking war crime," his nurse chuckled as she changed his bandages. Danny winced as the gauze peeled free. "Tell that to my bruised lung." "You're healing," she said gently, slowly. "But well, another 4 weeks and you might even make it through a corridor without wincing." She didn't mention the limp. Neither of them did. But the physical therapist had been clear. The damage to the ankle joint was going to take longer than the bones themselves, possibly months. Delta 7 rested its chin on his bed frame and blinked at him. "Can't even limp in peace," Danny muttered. "You're always watching me." The Vorkash chuffed. Week 2 brought a new development. Delta 7 began growling when anyone touched Danny. Even medics, even drones. The Academy convened an emergency panel to determine whether the creature should be restrained or relocated. The vote was unanimous, neither. Because the last time they tried to move him, Delta 7 had clawed a hole through the reinforced medbay floor. It hadn't attacked anyone, but it had made its feelings clear. Danny, groggy from painkillers, had apparently said, "He just wants to be the little spoon," before falling asleep mid-sentence. That quote was now printed on mugs. He hated everything. By the start of week 3, Danny could sit up fully and manage short stretches on crutches. His ribs still ached like hell at night, but the inflammation had gone down. The limp wasn't pretty, but at least he could shuffle without a chair. Which led to the biggest surprise yet. Delta 7 wanted to follow him to class. "No," Danny said, pointing a finger at the beast like a tired parent. "You stay here. I've got xenocultural analysis at second bell, and I do not need you licking the professor." Delta 7 blinked once, then trotted after him down the hall anyway. The auto doors tried to deny it access. Delta 7 scratched the control panel once, and they opened. Campus security scrambled a team. Delta 7 sniffed them all and sneezed. They let him pass. "I thought," Yar said, pressing 2 fingers to his temple as he watched the Vorkash settle beside Danny's seat, "that we had protocols for this." "We do," muttered the aide beside him, "but none of them cover Apex Predator Auditing Ethics class." Delta 7 yawned, opened a single eye, and stared at the overhead light until it dimmed. The class didn't breathe. Danny leaned over his desk. "Is this what tenure feels like?" No one laughed. Even Venno sat 2 rows away, tail wrapped tightly around her seat, occasionally glancing over like he might explode. Delta 7 purred softly. The sound filled the whole room. Yar cleared his throat. "Well, on to today's topic. How not to culturally offend your planetary hosts." Danny raised a hand. "Step 1. Don't bring your murder pet to class?" Yar sighed. "That would help, yes." By week 4, Danny had stopped correcting the rumors. There were too many, and frankly, some of them were too good. The Braskin twins whispered that he'd stared the Vorkash down and it had backed off first. A group of Vili cadets claimed he'd survived being bitten in half and reassembled in medbay. Someone in the galley insisted he could communicate with Delta 7 using only eyebrow movements. None of that was true. Danny had not stared anything down, he'd barely stayed conscious, and he certainly hadn't spoken eyebrow. But every time he hobbled into a corridor, with Delta 7 plodding after him like a titanium-scaled shadow, cadets scattered like terrified dominoes. No one bumped into him anymore. No one stole his seat. Nobody touched his tray in the mess hall. Which, all things considered, was kind of nice. Except for the part where the Academy filed a formal psychological observation order. "You're not in trouble," said Dr. Henley, the campus psychologist, as she scanned through her tablet. "This is just standard protocol when an apex life form has bonded to a cadet in a persistently cohabiting state." Danny arched an eyebrow from his seat. Delta 7 was curled at his feet, tail thudding lazily against the floor every few seconds. "Is that a polite way of saying I've adopted a murder tank?" "More like you've been adopted by a murder tank. Don't worry, that part's not your fault." "Gee, thanks." Henley smiled. "Look, I just want to talk about your stress levels, that's all. You've had a traumatic event, a long recovery, and now a completely unprecedented bond to the galaxy's most dangerous terrestrial predator. That's not a small load." Danny didn't argue. He couldn't. The weight in his chest still felt heavier than the bruised ribs had ever been. Some of it was physical, he still wasn't running drills. The limp hadn't gone away, and his PT said that could take another 3 months of regular work. But most of it was mental. He wasn't used to people watching him because they feared him. Or worse, that they pitied him believing he'd only bonded with Delta 7 because he'd been too weak to defend himself. Henley clicked her pen. "You've been through something rare, scary. You're allowed to feel off balance." "I don't feel off balance," Danny muttered. Delta 7 let out a small rumbling groan and rested its chin on his shoe. "Uh-huh," Henley said. The Academy, meanwhile, had gone into full procedural meltdown. There were meetings, dozens of them. Interdisciplinary teams formed just to decide whether Delta 7 counted as a hazardous service animal or a non-consensual emotional support companion. The Xenobiology department filed for grant money to study the long-term psychological impact of interspecies imprinting under stress. Security teams had to revise the emergency lockdown protocols for lecture bays 6 through 14, since Delta 7 refused to obey corridor restrictions. Facilities began installing reinforced resting platforms in classrooms after the Vorkash demolished a standard student desk while trying to nap. Danny found a copy of the latest internal bulletin. Section 1.4.3.9 now included a clause. In the event a cadet is accompanied at all times by a Class 5 Apex entity, instructors may waive punctuality penalties due to predator escort delay. He laughed for 3 straight minutes, then had to sit down to stop the stitches in his side from pulling. By the end of week 5, Danny had graduated from crutches to a walking boot. His ankle still throbbed by evening, and the limp hadn't gone anywhere, but he could make it to most classes without assistance now. His ribs had mostly knit, though he wasn't cleared for any kind of impact or strain. "You're healing on schedule," said Dr. Len, the lead med officer, during his checkup. "But the joint stiffness is going to be an issue. You'll need daily mobility work." "Already doing it," Danny said, grunting as he shifted his weight to test his balance, and icing it, and taking the meds, and sleeping on my back like a dead guy. "Good. Stick to the program, and you'll be able to jog by midterm season." Define jog. Not fall over when startled. Progress. Delta 7, now almost too large to fit through the med bay doorways, exhaled deeply and pawed at the floor. The linoleum cracked. Again. Len looked at the damage, then at Danny. "You know we can't house that thing in med for much longer, right?" Danny nodded. "He's already relocated himself to my quarters." Len froze. "He what?" "Just opened the door one night and claimed the corner. I woke up to him snoring louder than my vent unit." "You allowed it?" No, I just wasn't dumb enough to argue." At first, the Academy tried to assign a live and security officer. Delta 7 growled until the poor guy moved out by morning. Then they issued Danny an official handler permit. Delta 7 shredded the lanyard and kept the ID card. After that, they just stopped trying. His dorm was refitted with reinforced flooring, a widened entrance, and a ceiling-mounted surveillance node, discreet enough that Delta 7 didn't glare at it constantly. The cleaning staff only came by when Danny scheduled it in advance and promised to supervise. By week 6, Danny had been declared non-contagious, non-hazardous, and of stable temperament by 3 different departments. He was cleared to attend all classes. Delta 7 was cleared to follow him. Sort of. "Officially, he's listed as a learning observer," said Yar one morning as Delta 7 curled under the lecture bench. "Unofficially, we all know he's here for you." Danny winced as he eased into his seat. "Yeah. Tell that to the Braskins. They keep offering me snacks so I don't sick the beast." "Have you?" "No, but I thought about it." Yar actually chuckled. "We're submitting the entire incident as a case study to the Concordia Research Assembly. If it's accepted, you might qualify for a publication award." "I can't even walk without a limp, and I'm accidentally pioneering predator psychology?" "Indeed." Danny blinked. "Do I have to make a speech?" "Only if you want to." "I don't." "We'll let Delta 7 accept it on your behalf then." That was a joke. "Probably." That afternoon, Danny limped into the mess hall as usual, Delta 7 at his heel. The room went quiet. A few cadets nodded. A couple offered nervous smiles. One brave Veely even waved. Danny didn't wave back. He was focused on walking straight, evenly, without the boot dragging on the floor. He made it halfway to the table before his ankle faltered. Delta 7 immediately pressed its side against Danny's hip, steadying him. The cadets froze. Danny didn't say anything. He adjusted his grip on the tray and kept walking. By the time he sat down, the silence had turned into murmurs. Not fear, not gossip. Curiosity. And something close to respect. That night, Danny fell asleep with a muscle stimulator strapped to his calf, a cooling pack on his ribs, and a data tablet half-balanced on his stomach. He'd been reviewing xenopsych reports until the words started blurring. Delta 7 lay coiled at the foot of his bunk, tail twitching occasionally as if dreaming. He'd grown. Danny hadn't realized how much until he'd tried stepping over him and nearly face-planted. From the outside, none of this made sense. A predator bonded to a wounded cadet by accident. A Deathworld species refusing to leave a single human side. Medical reports, psychological assessments, diplomatic rewrites, none of them explained why Delta 7 chose him. But as Danny drifted off to sleep, feeling the faint warmth of a purring, armored mountain curled at his feet, he didn't care. He'd survived, he was healing. And somehow, impossibly, he had a friend. A deadly, oversized, terrifyingly loyal friend. Which, come to think of it, wasn't the worst dorm mate he'd ever had. 6 weeks post-incident, Danny ran for the first time. Not gracefully, not without pain, And definitely not without a chorus of startled gasps as he limped through the east corridor like a man determined to outpace his own limitations. But he ran. Technically, it was more of a stiff thudding shuffle with one good leg and one boot that still squeaked on the polished floor. His ribs ached with each stride, and his ankles screamed on the turns, but he didn't stop. Not even when his crutch slipped, not even when his side stitched, not even when he clipped a wall panel trying to pivot past a Brascan cadet who yelped and ducked. Behind him, Delta 7 loped patiently, matching his broken rhythm beat for beat, a silent, gleaming shadow that made every other cadet part like mist around a meteor. By the time Danny burst into Lecture Hall 7, sweat clinging to his temple and pulse thudding, he was grinning. He dropped into his seat, sucking air like someone who'd just outrun extinction itself, which, in a way, he had. The Vorkash padded to his usual spot and curled tightly under the bench with a satisfied huff. "Made it," Danny wheezed. Yar glanced up from his console. 10 seconds late. "I'll take it." Yar gave him a rare smile. "Welcome back, cadet." It turned out the campus award was real. Every semester, the Interspecies Academy awarded a Contribution to Interdisciplinary Understanding plaque to a cadet who had, in some improbable way, furthered cross-species harmony. Usually, it went to someone who translated a long-lost dialect or negotiated an awkward dorm assignment between feuding crustaceans. This year, the plaque went to the man who'd accidentally parented a biochemical nightmare and turned it into a lapdog. Danny is currently the only known member of any species to successfully initiate a non-lethal imprint bond with a mature Vorkash, the headmaster declared during the ceremony. Reading from a pulsing hollow script. Through sheer misfortune, patience, and sheer refusal to expire, he has advanced our understanding of apex predator cognition, scent-based imprinting, and the unquantifiable chaos of human biology. There was polite applause. Then awkward silence as Danny hobbled to the stage, Delta 7 stalking beside him. A few flashes went off. Several cadets visibly leaned back. Danny reached the podium, blinked into the lights, then tilted his head toward the faculty section. "Do I have to give a speech?" "You should," someone said from the front row. He cleared his throat. "Thanks for the, honor. I'd like to thank the med team for putting my ribs back together, the Xenobio staff for not panicking too loudly, and of course..." Delta 7 growled at the microphone. "My roommate." There was laughter, nervous, but real. Danny grinned. Delta 7 stepped forward, sniffed the trophy, then took it gently in his jaws and trotted back down the steps with it like it was a chew toy. Yar did not stop him. No one did. In the weeks that followed, Delta 7 slowly gained conditional clearance to be present in public spaces without constant escort. A task force was formed to study the imprinting event in controlled environments. Danny was offered a research assistant position in the xenopsychology lab. He accepted on the condition that Delta 7 be allowed in the observation room. Delta 7 took over 2 large mats, a bowl of sterilized meat cubes, and a wall-mounted heat emitter. The campus bookstore began selling plush Vorkash toys called Danicubs. Danny ordered one. Quietly. He still had bad days. Some mornings, the limp was worse. The joint didn't always cooperate, and his physical therapist warned that uneven healing could trigger chronic stiffness if he didn't stay ahead of the recovery schedule. And some nights, when the lights dimmed and the ship vibrated in its quiet, orbital way, Danny still flinched awake, remembering the Vorkash's eyes calculated, unblinking bearing down in the instant before everything changed. But Delta 7 never let anyone too close. Never let anyone touch him without permission. Never left his side for more than a few minutes. Even when the Academy tried relocating him for security drills, the creature found a way back to Danny's quarters once by dismantling a bulkhead vent. "Doesn't it bother you?" Vino asked one afternoon during a group study session. "Being followed. All the time?" Danny tilted his head. Delta 7 was dozing under the table, tail twitching in sleep. "Sometimes," Danny said, "but I think he gets it." "Gets what?" "What it's like to be dangerous to others without meaning to be hurt and not know who to trust." Venno blinked all 4 eyes slowly. "That's actually kind of poetic. I blame the painkillers." They laughed. During his final medical evaluation of the semester, Dr. Len handed him a revised prognosis. Your ribs are fully healed, she said. Your joints stable, but you'll need another month before you can safely run long distance. Maybe more for sharp pivoting. So, no combat drills yet? Not until after the break. But for what it's worth, you've recovered faster than we expected. Danny leaned back, exhaled. That's good to hear. Delta 7, currently lounging in the medbay corner like a scaled sofa, huffed as if unimpressed. Oh, come on, Danny said. You saw me run last week. The Vorkash snorted and turned away. Len smiled. You're doing well, Danny. You've come a long way. He nodded. He still hurt sometimes, still limped, still dreamed of acid breath and pulsing sirens, but he was here. Not dead. Not broken. Just slightly refurbished. On the last night before break, the Academy held a stargazing event on Observation Deck Gamma. Danny made it there late, walking carefully, Delta 7 beside him. The deck was dim, the view of Tau Cygni V sweeping across the wide glass viewport like a painting in motion. A few cadets nodded as he approached. No one stared anymore. He found a seat on the edge, stretched his ankle, and watched the stars. Delta 7 lay down beside him, for once, silent. No purring, no humming, just warm, steady presence. Danny looked out at the distant lights. So, he said quietly, what do we do if they try to take you away? Delta 7's eye flicked toward him. Then, back to the stars. Danny smiled. Yeah, me neither. He leaned back, exhaled slow. Out there somewhere, Threnox still burned. A death world, a nightmare planet. But here, on this unlikely orbital academy, its apex predator slept like a guard dog at a wounded man's feet. And that man? He'd just earned top marks in survival, friendship, and the sheer, stubborn magic of being human.